Good morning, everyone. How are you today? I hope you find them. Today, I would like to present the journal that I review to full the individual assignment of the PPT English course for biology taught by Miss Rifka Fahrunisa. Before I explain the results of the analysis of the article that I have made, I would like to introduce the identity of the journal article. The name of the journal is Biology and Environment, and the title of the article is A Typological Classification of Headwater Streams in Ireland, published by the Royal Irish Academy, with volume 112B, number 3, year published 2012, and on page 253 until 255. This journal has been indexed by Scopus, namely Q2, and has a reputation of H-index 29 with ISSN number 079179445. Alright, next I will explain about the background of writing the article A Typological Classification of Water Streams in Ireland. The first is because the lack of knowledge regarding the upstream flow of macroinvertebrates with Ireland makes the main aim of the study to describe the macro community of the 74 upstream sites, representing the geological and geographic range of focus in the river system, and to purpose a typological classification of the upstream sitting group identified using multivariate clustering and development group coordination, and to determine environmental factors associated with macroid assemblies. And then the second one is this study highlight the importance of divining an upstream typological so that condition for each species can be established and thus form a basis that can be used to support future biodiversity or water quality. The last one is this article presents research results that address the lack of knowledge about macroinvertebrate communities in the Upper Irish River. Therefore, the main objective is to identify and describe these communities, which represent reference systems across various geological and geographical settings, in order to develop a typological classification for the sites. The use of such a classification has implications for the river system as a whole by providing insight into setting environmental parameters and identifying reference states one can establish in a baseline and therefore potentially identify and anthropogenic problems upstream that might affect the downstream part of the river. Next, I will explain some of the questions that arise in this article. 1. Who are the macro communities in the 74 upstream locations that represent the geological and geographic range? 2. What is the relationship between macroinvertebrates community and physicochemical variables? 3. What are the environmental factors affecting classification in the 74 upstream locations? Okay, and then methodology. 74 upstream sets were selected across the country covering a broad environmental gradient varying from acidic highlands to nutrient-rich lowlands. Set selection was based on the reference condition approach set out in the VFD, which states the reference conditions have no, or only very little, evidence of anthropogenic impact. The sites were either first or second order streams and were all within 2.5 km of the source as defined earlier. The streams are located between 35 meters above sea level and 490 meters. 50 of these seats were sampled in 2004, and another 25 24 rivers were sampled in 2005. Macroinvertebrate samples were collected at its site in the spring, April until May, and summer, July until August of 2004 or 2005. Five replicates 1 minute multi-habit kick samples were taken using a standard pond net, with time in its habitat. Three of the replicate samples were taken within 100 meters, and to account for the marked longitudinal change upstream, the other two samples were taken 100 meters and 200 meters farther upstream. 1 minute hand select search of the subtract was also performed at its site to collect macroinvertebrates. This is done to ensure that invertebrates that may not be released during the kick sampling process are collected. Wingspan. This program calculates the percentage of dispersion of homogeneity in a group that achieve a dispersion of 60 degrees or less are considered homogeneous enough and are considered similar enough to be validated as a goal group. The multi-response permutation procedure (MRPP) was used to test for significant difference between groups of the twinspan division. The PC or statistical program version 3.04 was used for MRPP analysis. Principal component analysis, which was run in the community analysis package version 4, was used to select the most important physicochemical parameters in the analysis. Delay correspondence analysis is used to determine the exact ordination for what selection of variable was carried out at Kanoko to determine the most important variables. This is necessary before a CCA is conducted to ensure that only the variables that are significant and that explain most of the variance are considered. Multicollinearity was also evaluated in order to remove highly correlated variables that retaining one variable as a proxy. CCA was then used to determine the relationship between the microinvertebrate community and the chemical variables using the community ecology 246 analysis. One way, ANOVA using primer 6 and PermaNOVA was performed to test for significant difference between groups and variable as a proxy. CCA was then used to determine the relationship between the macroinvertebrate community and the basic chemical variables using the community ecology 246 analysis. I mean between groups and groups using selected physicochemical variables in performed to test for significant difference between groups using a physicochemical variables selected chemistry in Kanoko. The result of the research is the most diverse group recorded were Trichoptera, 40 taxa, Diptera, 31 taxa, and Coleoptera, 36 taxa. The total taxon richness recorded for each site ranged from 26 to 73 taxa, with an average of 47 taxa per site. Communities in all locations were dominated by insects, with the APT taxa, Ephemeroptera, Plecoptera, Trichoptera, making up 43 degrees of the recorded taxa. The most widespread taxa found at over 90 degrees of sites included Ampinemura sulcolis or stepens, Leoptera inermis or Kemni, Cyplonaperla torternium, Rhinacopila dorsalis, Plectropnemia conspersa, Dicranota spp, Orthocladenia spp, and Thainipodinae spp, Simolium sp, and Vela. This taxa accounts for less by 8 degrees of the total wet taxon. Okay, We inside the parts of uh, discussion. The macroinvertebrates that characterize Group 1 include B. ricci, P. cingulatus, and the highest abundance Gammarus dubeni, which is known to be associated with calcium-rich water. Several sites in Group 1 with higher B abundance ricci has steeper slopes than the other lower ones. Slope side. When the flow sequence were examined, lower amounts of B rich were generally found in the first order streams, then in the second sequences. This would suggest that the increased discharge of the second order river and the greater slope, both of which affect the flow, might support the higher abundance of Bayerisi. Group 2 is characterized by underlying sedimentary geology including sand tombs and some limestone in some places. Group 2 was isolated from Group 1, the location with the highest abundance of Hydrophylla spp and H. silatelae. Furthermore, Hydrophylla has been shown to be more abundant in warmer rivers. Group 3 is also characterized by the presence of species such as Baetis gamus. This species is widespread in unplaned rivers surrounded by peat soil. It avoids sandy substrates and feeds by grazing on rocks. The greater substrate dominance at Group 3 sites highlights their suitability as habitat for bee famous. Other Macaulay species such as Ecdionorus spp and Saratilla ignita were absent or reduced to a solid record is in Group 2. Group 4 sites are located at higher elevation than all other groups, with turbulent conditions due to cuts and ponds giving rise to a larger substrate type including rock layers and boulders. Most of Group 4 sites also have low conductivity and P pH with indicator species such as Emeritus inopinatus and Diorabi caudata. The result of the study that different environmental gradients define macroinvertebrates assemblage within the headwaters studied are largely in line with those defined in a number of other studies of upstream communities. Okay, next, conclusions. This article addressed the lack of knowledge regarding the upstream follow the macroinvertebrates with Ireland. The main objective of the study are to describe the macro community of the 74 upstream sites representing the geological and geographic range that are the focus of the reference system and to purpose a typological classification of the identified upstream sitting groups using multivariate clustering and development group ordinances and to determine the environmental factor involved associated with the macroin pool. The identified groups were mostly grouped according to FAR 1 environment of sober geological drain site with non-peat soil with higher conductivity, and the total of the other groups, Group 2, has the same geology and agrarian drain mainly with non-peat conductivity level lower than Group 1 and has the largest representation of sea substrate between groups. Group 3 sites with mainly silica geological drains with P characterized by a pyramidally bedrock boulder and substrate. Finally, the silica geology of Group 4 with a pit soil and located at the highest elevation and chemical correspondence analysis or CCA was carried out to determine the relationship of macroinvertebrates community and physicochemical variables. It is clear that its CO variables, including conductivity and pH, play a considered role in determining the one-way ANOVA. Also highlighting the importance of some desk variables at this site. The study highlights the importance of defining an upstream typology so that conditions for its species can be established, and thus from the basis data can be used to support future biodiversity or water quality.